You are now watching the True Mets Talk podcast live stream. We will be going live shortly. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.
Shallow right field, stumbling start for Stewart. It's close to deep left field by Alvarez, and that's going to go away. 4 straight games for the second time in he's homered in 4.
All right, everyone, we are live. Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. We are going to be talking all things Mets and especially Pete Alonso, as you all can tell by the thumbnail. Happy Sunday. It's early. This might be the earliest I've ever gone live on a stream in my entirety of doing Mets content on this channel. But as always, I appreciate you all who are here in the live chat. Make sure you hit that thumbs up. If you happen to catch the replay because you're sleeping in on a Sunday, I don't blame you whatsoever. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Make sure you follow me on all my social medias at CPNYSports, all that good stuff, and the shameless plugging. So I really wanted to focus this episode surrounding Pete Alonso and some of the statistics that I've kind of come across on his baseball reference page, particularly as it pertains to his 2024 statistics so far. We'll be going over that, but obviously last night, the Mets did win a ball game 1-0 in game 2 of this Marlins series. We do have game 3 coming up. Pre-game show with Rob coming later this afternoon. We'll be talking all about the upcoming matchup in this game, but I just wanted to give you all a brief overview here of what we have for the next 2 games in this Miami Marlins series before we talk a little bit more in depth about Pete Alonso. You can see here to the right, the New York Mets are still in a wild card position. They are right there neck and neck with the Arizona Diamondbacks, who are on an absolute heater and have turned their season around. And you can see here, I believe the Atlanta Braves yesterday swept that day-night doubleheader, and the Mets are only a half game behind the Cardinals right now for that second wild card spot. Christian Scott later on today, first pitch at 1:40 is going to be going up against Trevor Rogers. And in game 4 tomorrow, believe it's a 6:40 start time, we do have David Peterson, the lefty, versus Yanni Chirino. So that is what we have going on for this Marlins Mets series. Again, like I said, don't want to steal the thunder away from the pregame show. That's going to be happening later today with talking Mets with Rob and myself, but just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a preview about where we're at right now, coming off of that 1-0 win last night in Miami. So appreciate everyone being here. Darren, thank you so much for being here. Salute to you. Like I said, I know a lot of people are probably sleeping in on this Sunday. A lot of people are going to be joining us probably for the Amazing Mets pregame show later on this afternoon. I don't want to make this live stream too much. I don't want to go too much into the weeds of things in terms of Pete Alonso and discussions. I don't want to be a negative Nancy. I don't want to sort of put down anybody right now, but some of the stuff that I have been seeing with Pete Alonso, we've been talking about it, have been concerning. His overall numbers, like you see here on the screen, and we'll kind of transition into that Pete Alonso discussion. These are his 2024 numbers in a nutshell. And like I said here, I have been having some connection issues. I was actually originally planning to do this stream as a pre-recorded episode last night to drop it this morning, but I was having some connection issues. So if at any point during this stream, I sort of sound funky, then please let me know in the live chat. I would definitely appreciate that. But here are Pete Alonso's 2024 numbers. You can see here he's hitting 239 after last night's game, 320 OBP, which is respectable in the 320s, 770 OPS, which has been steadily declining over the last few months, 19 home runs and 51 RBIs. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he is third on the New York Mets in terms of total RBIs, and we've seen him be successful in recent years driving in runners, still on pace to get 100 plus RBIs, which is always great, especially if you're in the middle of the lineup. But we cannot lie to ourselves right now. Pete Alonso is not performing, right, even to the naked eye test, up to expectations of what we all expect from Pete Alonso, what we've seen from Pete Alonso in seasons prior, and just the bar that he has naturally set for himself in a contract walk type of year where he's set to hit free agency and where presumably he is going to be demanding high dollar value over 5, 6, 7, maybe even an 8-year contract being a Scott Boras client. So we're going to be talking about his numbers here. I was browsing some baseball reference pages under the quote unquote clutch statistics category, and some stuff just caught my eyes because I know that there's been a lot of narratives surrounding Pete Alonso, some of which definitely have some merit, and I'll talk about that today. Some of which I think people definitely go above and beyond just to slander Pete Alonso a little bit extra, where I think that he has gotten some undeserved criticism because at the end of the day, you look at Pete Alonso's 2024 numbers in the first half so far. They are not fantastic. They're not going to wow you, especially for someone wanting a high dollar value contract. But at the end of the day, what he's producing so far in total isn't horrible, right? But what are we as Mets fans expecting from Pete Alonso? We're not expecting him to not horrible. We're expecting greatness from Pete Alonso. And that, so far, he has not produced. So you get a good look at his 2024 numbers overall, and we'll talk about everything else in between here. So like I said, if you are here, I appreciate you being here so early with me on a Sunday morning. It's 9:36 a.m. Start your mornings off right. Hopefully you all are drinking your coffee, your water, whatever it is that you do to start your Sunday mornings. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you are new here. If you are on the channel, whether you're on X or over on YouTube, or whether you're watching this later on X or YouTube, come over to the YouTube channel and make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. I am pushing towards 900 subscribers on the channel. I definitely appreciate it. And if at any point you all see something or have a question about what I'm going to be talking about here in the next maybe 10 to 15 minutes or so, like I said, it's going to be a very short live stream. Please drop your comments and questions in the live chat. I definitely appreciate that. We can definitely have a discussion because at the end of the day, these numbers right here are still a little bit subjective, and I'm going to try to make sense of them with the subsequent slides. But this is what we've heard from a lot of people surrounding Pete Alonso, especially last year going into this year, where he hit 40-plus home runs last year, but he just didn't quite look like himself, quote unquote, because of the batting average or what have you, right? If you're a batting average lover, right, in the baseball world, baseball fans have been shying away recently from the batting average, and they haven't been loving it. They'll take the OPS, they'll take the home runs, the RBIs, etc. The more power, premier power guys play better in today's baseball game. That's what the narrative has been. So, like I said, in wins versus losses, this what stuck out to me about Pete Alonso. He is batting exponentially higher when the Mets lose ball games than when they win. And I don't have any sort of concrete reasoning as to why that is. There are multiple factors in which could play out to describe and give reason behind what you see here in green versus red. But it is a fact that Pete Alonso hits better in losses than he does in wins. And if I think about middle of the order guys, this kind of starts to concern me, especially when we're talking about potentially giving Pete Alonso a long-term contract. Now, I'm not this live stream, this podcast episode, whatever you want to call it, by no means is telling you all or is insinuating that I am not in the camp of wanting to extend Pete Alonso. I do think Pete Alonso, with what he's done so far, has dug himself a hole in terms of getting the value of years that he might have wanted going into this season. So I really don't think that a short-term deal, a prove-it type deal, 2-3 years for Pete Alonso is out of the question. And we've seen that with Scott Boras clients this past offseason, Jordan Montgomery, even a guy like Blake Snell, who were vying for high value years on contract extensions, simply didn't get offered that, and they had to settle for short-term prove-it deals. If Pete Alonso doesn't have a strong second half and doesn't improve some of the numbers that we're going to be talking about here in this next slide, then he might be heading down towards that path. Now, like I said, anything can happen. Pete Alonso, I said it yesterday on my post game, on the pregame, I expect him fully to turn it around. I expect that out of the polar bear. I know he expects that out of himself, and I know most Mets fans expect that. But what we've seen so far, like I said, just simply isn't up to the par of level of expectations going into this walk year that we've seen from Pete. So take this graphic right here that you see on your screen at face value. You see in wins where the New York Mets win ball games, Pete Alonso is hitting 219 with a 312 OBP. The OPS is below 750. He's got a 401 slugging percentage, 8 home runs, and 27 RBIs. You look at these numbers conversely for Pete Alonso when the Mets lose ball games. And like I said, the reason why I don't want to draw concrete conclusions because in these quote unquote losses, we don't know if they're losing by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many runs. And that situational baseball definitely changes the landscape of at bats. So like I said, take this with a grain of salt, but the next slide might explain a little bit further of the reasoning behind these green and red sort of numbers here. In losses, like you see here on your screen, I don't even have to say it, but you see the difference between 258 and 219. The OBP is higher, the OPS is higher, the slugging percentage is exponentially higher, and he's got more home runs in losses. And this is kind of where the conversation surrounding Pete Alonso, his quote-unquote solo home runs, his garbage time home runs comes into play. And I've been one to sort of backtrack that narrative and push back on it because I really thought that it was unfair, especially in the beginning of this season, to say that about Pete Alonso because, quite simple, when I see him have good at bats, especially when it matters, that makes me happy. But at some point, we have to realize that that hasn't been happening more often than not in 2024. So take a good look at these numbers on your screen. I see there's some comments popping up. We're going to be talking about it. Appreciate you all being here. Stevie Mack saying, Pete wants to get paid like a superstar, needs to actually start playing like one first. Absolutely. I think that's the reason why I wanted to make this podcast episode, because at the end of the day, what have I seen Mets fans who love Pete Alonso and who are Pete Alonso fans say time and time again? And I am in that camp. By no means do I want to be lumped into that category of rooting against Pete Alonso. And I said it here in the pinned message. We are all rooting for Pete Alonso to turn it around. The second half that he's going to have to get paid like a superstar, Stevie Mack, is going to be exponential compared to what he produced in the first half. And I just told you his first half numbers, the 239, the 19 home runs, 51 RBIs, that is okay. But does that play okay enough and well enough for him and for other teams, the Mets in particular, to justify a value of a contract 7 years for $200+ million? For me, at the end of the day, being objective and telling it to you all as viewers like it is, right? The answer is no. So he's going to have a huge first half to recuperate what we've seen over the course of the first half. Darren saying, what is Pete's average with bases empty? That is something that I don't actually know. I'll have to pull from the baseball reference page. I'm going to be talking about his clutch statistics, and I'm going to be talking about his numbers with runners in scoring position, just to give you a little bit of sneak peek after I get through these comments. But baseball reference on the same page. Let me just look at this real quick because you're asking. Pete Alonso stats. I can pull it up right here in front of me. I wish I had the screen sharing capability. I actually do, but I'm not going to screen share right now because I don't have that overlay set up on my StreamYard. But let's see here. Do I have the splits here for Pete Alonso or not? 2024 splits, platoon splits, first half or second half. He had a decent June, by the way. He hit 272 in June. He had 19 RBIs and 5 home runs. So he had a decent June, but I don't think the March and May were up to par with what we are usually used to seeing from Pete Alonso. But let's see here. The situational. First pitch, 0 outs. Men on base on first. I don't see that. 0 out. Anyways, we can have a conversation about this in the pregame show if we talk about Pete Alonso to this question, Stevie Mack. Or not Stevie Mack, Darren, I apologize. But anyways, regardless, appreciate you being here, Darren. Appreciate you, Stevie, being here. Appreciate you, Brad. Thank you so much, LGM. Would the Mets trade for Vlad Jr. and keep them both for this year as Pete Insurance? No, I don't think this is feasible at all, Brad. I know that there's been a select few Mets fans who have been talking about Vlad Jr. and what the Blue Jays might or might not do with him at the deadline, I don't think it's feasible. I don't think they're going to sort of keep both, right? There's no world that I see the Mets making a trade for Vlad Jr., period. But even if they did, even if there was a world, there's no way that I see a world where they don't trade Pete Alonso in that scenario as sort of a swap. So I don't really think that that's feasible, just to answer your question very shortly. Brad saying Pete Alonso has been very disappointing, needs to heat up. Absolutely, 100%. What's up to you? Let's see here. Anyways, Jung-Hoo Lee, I do not ignore your chats. I am propping you up right now. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. If you have any questions or comments about what we're talking about here, please let me know in the chat. I'm answering everybody's chat right now. Like I said, the chat has always gotten so full in recent streams, but I do like to talk with everybody. So I appreciate you, Jung-Hoo Lee, for being here. Going way back, Pete helped us win game 1, win our very first. M-Easy. I know M-Easy's had a lot of conversations surrounding Pete Alonso, especially in Talking Mets with Rob's live chat as well. The last time he has had a big hit was that Citi Field Sunday afternoon ball game against the Padres, a 3-run homer in the first inning. And I believe Rob was talking about it yesterday, and I kind of sat back and looked at it. I was like, wow, when was the last time that Pete Alonso actually has hit a home run? We talk about him being one of the premier home run guys, power hitting guys in the league. He's not even top 10 in home runs this year, and that is quite concerning in terms of the actual rate that he is hitting home runs in and the at-bats in between his first home run versus his next home run. So that is something that we are also talking about in terms of Pete Alonso. D is saying it feels like Pete is too much inside his own head. That won't go over. That won't. Excuse me. It's early. I apologize. That won't go well over for $20 million for him. Yeah, absolutely. And this is the conversation that I kind of wanted to just draw back in. D, I appreciate you being here. I think Pete does get 40 home runs, but he's going to have a very big mountain to climb. That's a great question. I think I would be more comfortable projecting him in the high 30s rather than actually hitting 4-0, but I think he can if he has as strong as a second half as I think he might have. Now, again, I have no basis to back that actual claim that he's going to have a strong second half, but knowing Pete Alonso, and this is the kind of conversation that a lot of people are wondering, whether it's a talent gap level with Pete Alonso that he's just slowly declining. Maybe pitchers are figuring out his weaknesses and they're sort of just exploiting that a little bit more this season and will continue to exploit that, or whether he's in his own head and facing the pressures that come with a walk year in a New York market. I think it's the latter. And the reason I always say this, and I said it in yesterday's pregame or postgame, I should say, is that it just looks like he's pressing out there. And I'm sure it felt very good for him last night to flick a ball with his wrist and the immense power that he has that Keith Hernandez was talking about onto the warning track, almost out of the yard, with basically swinging with two arms and nothing in his lower half. That must have felt good for him, but the types of swings that I'm seeing from Pete Alonso just simply aren't up to par, and it looks like he's guessing out there. I'm going to say it probably 10 to 20 more times until I see otherwise from Pete. It looks like he's not seeing the ball well, and it looks like he's just absolutely guessing out there, which I think is more of the problem, and that is the mental aspect of the game rather than the actual raw tools that he may or may not possess. I don't think it's a talent gap level, and I never will until this maybe materializes for 3-4 more years. I simply do think that he has every tool possible up at the plate to be a successful hitter and what we saw in 2019 and up until this point. Now, the defense is a different story because this guy still can't throw to second base to save his life from first base, but that's a different story. We saw that last night, and he was bringing Francisco Lindor off the bag. I'm not going to talk about Pete Alonso's defense. What I'm here is to talk about Pete Alonso's offense. So let's get into it. Like I said, we're about 20 minutes into the stream. I'm only going to keep you all for about another 5, 6, maybe even 7 minutes. I always say that, and then I always end up going over time. But let me just go here and show you all what I was kind of saying earlier with these clutch stats that I saw in Baseball Reference. Here, highlighted in yellow, is my primary concern other than the fact of what you see on the right-hand side of your screen, right? So I'm concerned with Pete Alonso's ability to hit with runners in scoring position And that hasn't been pretty. You see here, 220 batting average. The OBP is still great. The slugging percentage is not great. The OPS has dipped and only 3 home runs with runners in scoring position, which is something that if you're going to hit in the middle of the lineup and the Mets are going to have to, if the Mets are looking to achieve optimal results in the win-loss column, Pete Alonso has to be better with runners in scoring position. So the numbers on the right have to be better. But what also has to be better, and what also might explain the numbers that you saw previously on the previous slide, in terms of the wins versus the losses and how Pete Alonso fares in both of those situations, is what you see right here on your screen. Late and close ball games is defined, as per Baseball Reference, as plate appearances by a player in the 7th inning or later, with the batting team either being tied, ahead by 1 run, or have the tying run at least on deck. So that is what Baseball Reference is defining as late and close in your clutch statistics category. You can see here, in those scenarios, Pete Alonso is batting 146. His slugging percentage is 291, and his OPS in those situations are a flat 600. So when Pete Alonso, this is essentially saying if Pete Alonso is coming up late in the ball game with a close ball game, with the Mets either being tied, ahead by 1, or down by 1, Pete Alonso is not faring well at all. But you also see here, as you go down the list in the game scenarios with the Mets either being tied, within 1 run, within 2 runs, or within 3 runs, Pete Alonso still isn't getting the job done. Now he's getting better and better and better as the Mets are losing further and further and further and by more runs. And that's the kind of trend that might explain those quote unquote empty stats that everybody has been talking about with Pete Alonso, especially the same thing happened last season, but especially in the first half of this season. Pete Alonso hits better, right? And this is a pattern that you see on your screen. He hits better as the Mets are losing by more runs, which you can only assume that the pressure is more and more off of Pete Alonso in those situations, right? Because you see here, the first row after the highlight in yellow, within 4 runs, Pete Alonso's up to 224 and his OPS rises to 726. And when the margin of differential, when the Mets are losing by more than 4 runs, wouldn't you know it, Pete Alonso is automatically all of a sudden batting 359 with an OBP of 450 and an OPS of 1125. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a pattern. That is what I call a pattern. That is an ascending pattern as the Mets are out of ball games, or more so out of ball games. Pete Alonso is doing better when they are losing by more runs. This is a very hard sort of explanation, so hopefully you all are following. If you have any questions, please toss them in the live chat. I'm trying to answer or explain this as best as possible, because I was just sitting here. I wasn't planning to talk about this at all. And I went to Baseball Reference, particularly Pete Alonso's page, and this jumped out at me like a sore thumb. And I had to talk about this because this shocked me. I didn't buy into this narrative at all, but it seems like the empty stats trend has certainly played out in the first half of this season. So you see here, Pete Alonso, as the Mets are losing by more and more runs in a ball game, Pete Alonso seems to be more comfortable and he does more of his damage when the Mets are losing by 4 or more runs than he does in late and close ball games, tie ball games, and when the Mets are winning or losing by 1, 2, or 3 runs. So I'm not really sure how to explain this other than what you see on your screen here. I don't have any explanation for this. I'm trying to make sense of this myself as I'm talking about this, because this is absolutely insane when you think about it. And when you have people who back in April, May, June, were talking about, wow, it seems like Pete Alonso only hits home runs in garbage time. It seems like Pete Alonso does most of his damage late in ball games when the Mets are already out of it to bring them back within 3 or 4 runs. This is probably what they're talking about. And I was the biggest, I guess, proponent or opponent of that narrative because I didn't buy into it until I stumbled upon this. And I'm just like, my eyes are wowed. Now, let's look at this conversely. If you all need to look back on this, please do so and hit the replay button after you're done watching this. Let's look at this conversely from the guys that are also part of this core, not named Jeff McNeil. So let's first look at Mr. Francisco Lindor. This is his clutch statistics in 2024 so far. So late in close ball games, like I said, the definition is down below, 7th inning or later plate appearances when it's a relatively close ball game, right? He's still not doing great. He's doing better than Pete Alonso, that's for damn sure. He's hitting 200 with a 339 slugging percentage and a 636 OPS. So that is better than Pete Alonso, but not by much. But look at the numbers conversely to Pete Alonso's in tie ball games when the Mets are within 1 run, within 2 runs, or within 3 runs. Look at Francisco Lindor statistics. He's hitting 282 in tie ball games, 277 when the Mets are within 1 run, and the OPS is following. The on-base percentage is following. So Francisco Lindor in relatively close ball games is finding success. Now, the difference between late and close and what you see on your screen here versus within 1 run, within 2 runs, within 3 runs is that 7th inning or later, right? These at-bats highlighted within 1 run, within 2 runs, within 3 runs, take into account at-bats and plate appearances prior to the 7th inning, whereas late and close is only 7th inning and beyond. But nonetheless, you expect your core and the big guys in your lineup to produce when the ball games are close. Pete Alonso hasn't, and Francisco Lindor has. Now let's take a look at Brandon Nimmo. Look at that late and close category that I have highlighted there. First of all, let's take a look at 2 outs with runners in scoring position because I just told you that Pete Alonso's runners in scoring position numbers need to be better. With runners in scoring position with 2 outs, when the Mets desperately need a hit for an RBI or just to keep the chain moving, Brandon Nimmo is hitting 368 with an 1151 OPS. That is the definition of a clutch player right there. And that follows congruently with late and close ball games. He's hitting 280 with the 660 slug and still over a 1,000 OPS. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Nimmo is probably one of the most clutch, if not the most clutch player, and the statistics back that up. This is what we want to see. A combination of this with what we see from Francisco Lindor when the ball games are close, and also with Brandon Nimmo when the ball games are close late in the ball game is what we want to see Pete Alonso be on par with the rest of these 2 guys, Brandon Nimmo and Francisco Lindor. So that's really all that I have in terms of Pete Alonso as Pete Alonso goes. Because at the end of the day, we can look at these statistics and we can nitpick at them all we want. Obviously, there's a lot of context that's probably missing still, and I'm going to be the first one to tell you that. But if you are a Mets fan that wants Pete Alonso to be extended, and rightfully so, because he has proven that he is one of the premier power-hitting guys in this league, you have to expect better out of him when it becomes clutch time in those clutch time situations. And that's what Pete Alonso has not done so far in 2024. And if I go back and show you the 2023 values under this same category, under Baseball Reference, you'd be surprised that Pete Alonso still wasn't fantastic in 2023, even though he posted 40-plus home runs. So like I said, as I said in the pinned message here, we are all rooting for Pete Alonso to prosper. David Stearns is rooting for Pete Alonso to prosper. Steve Cohen is rooting for Pete Alonso to prosper. As long as you have New York on the front of your chest, we are rooting for you to prosper. But we have to be objective in the conversations that we have at the midway point of the season with the second half now underway. That Pete Alonso in the middle of the lineup, right, has not produced in situations where the Mets need him to produce the most. And the statistics at face value with what we just went over back that up to a T. So like I said, apologies for a little bit of, I guess, a negative morning, although I call it more objective than negative because a lot of people are frustrated with Pete Alonso right now, and rightfully so. But at the end of the day, the Mets have a ball game later today, and it's another opportunity for Pete Alonso to start a hot streak and prove to everybody that he is worth what he's asking for. And if he doesn't, he's got a long negotiation period ahead of him this coming off season. So like I said, amazing Mets pregame show going down in just a couple of hours. We'll be breaking down this game 2 match, or game 3 matchup, between the Miami Marlins and the New York Mets. Christian Scott versus Trevor Rogers up on the mound today as your pitching probables. We'll continue to monitor Pete Alonso, right? We'll see how he sort of changes his at-bats and his approach with runners in scoring position when the Mets are losing versus when the Mets are winning. And when you watch Pete Alonso's at-bats, just think back to this podcast episode and think back of what I showed you and go see for yourself. I linked the Baseball Reference page in which I took these statistics directly from, because anybody can go on their page. They do a great job updating the statistics very quickly. You can go on Pete Alonso's Baseball Reference. You can go on Mark Viento's Baseball Reference, Francisco Lindor's, Brandon Nimmo's, and look at these statistics and look at the splits of these guys by yourself. So I wanted to start this Sunday off by talking about Pete Alonso a little bit more in depth. Like I said, I was having connection issues, was going to do a pre-recorded episode surrounding this, but it was a little bit laggy, so I figured I might as well try my luck going live. Hopefully, there was no technical difficulties. Hopefully, I was loud and clear. The New York Mets are still maintaining that position in the third wildcard spot. We have a 1:41 pitch today, a Sunday matinee game, and I appreciate everyone being here with me. D, I appreciate you. I try my best to make sense of what we've seen and the trends that we've seen, because at this point with Pete Alonso, even with Brandon Nimmo, who's turned it around, that's called a trend when you see it for multiple games and multiple week stretches. So it has to be called out and it has to be talked about. Got Frank in here as well, predicting they will make Vientos the first baseman and either Bregman or Mauricio the third baseman next season. A lot of people are talking about that as well. I don't quite have a well-informed opinion or a complete thought about that just yet. It's a good idea. You're not the first one to propose that I've seen on Mets Twitter, but at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think Pete Alonso is going anywhere this deadline. They're going to wait and see to see if he actually turns it around like I think he is in the second half, and then they will make their judgment this coming off season. Frankie T is also following up saying, remember when Conforto turned out an extension? This will be the same with Alonso. Might never see that contract offer again. Like I said, I would not be surprised. Again, this might be a little bit premature, but I might not be surprised if this offseason, wherever Pete Alonso ends up, whether it's back with the New York Mets or somewhere else, if he is on a short-term deal, if what we just talked about in this stream right here continues to persist. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. Darren, you are preaching to the choir here. This is exactly what I talk about when Rob and I talk about Pete Alonso, and we get into our lengthy conversations about Pete Alonso. There are a lot of situations where all Alonso needs to do is make a productive out, and he hasn't done so the majority of the times. He hasn't done so the majority of the times, and the statistics prove that. But I agree. And case in point, the primary scenario was this game, or game 1 of this Miami Marlins series, first and third, one out. He gets his bat sawed off and he grounds into the double play. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Like I said, we're not drawing any erroneous conclusions in terms of Pete Alonso's future as a Met based off what we talk about today. All we want to see is Pete Alonso turn it around, and we want to see him become more of a quote-unquote clutch hitter, according to what Baseball Reference has slated as clutch hitting. We want to see him better when the Mets are closer in ball games, or maybe even a tied ball game, because the Mets will be that much better off. And if Pete Alonso gets it going, this is what I'm going to leave you all with. If Pete Alonso gets it going with the way Brandon Nimmo's swinging the bat, with the way that Francisco Lindor is swinging the bat, Mark Vientos is swinging the bat, even Francisco Alvarez is swinging the bat. Oh, and by the way, now that Jeff McNeil is taking better at bats as well, the Mets will automatically be better off for the rest of their season. We need Pete Alonso. The Mets need Pete Alonso. And if the Mets want to solidify their wild card spot, after the 162nd game is done being played, Pete Alonso needs to turn it around, because we just can't have this okay version of him. We need a great version of him in the middle of this order. Brennan's making a fair point. Would you want a Pete extension? I do want a Pete extension. But the problem is what I've heard so far and what's been leaked that he is asking for, I don't know if a lot of teams are going to be jumping for joy in terms of actually giving him that. And I don't think Stearns is going to be pretty thrilled about that either. So great question, Brennan. I don't know if he's a Stearns guy. As we said yesterday, Stearns has no connection to most of these guys, right? Outside of the couple guys that he brought from the Milwaukee Brewers in that offseason trade. Pete Alonso's in that category. He has no connections to David Stearns at all. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. Now, like I said, I expect Pete Alonso to be here post-deadline. But when the offseason hits and when you're a Boras client, strange things happen. And that's all I'll say. So I appreciate you all being here. Mets have a game coming up. Thank you so much. Let's get another win. Let's keep stacking wins, because that's what this season is all about. Keep stacking wins. If you are here, hit that thumbs up. If you're going to watch the replay, because like I said, this is a very early stream, hit that thumbs up as well. If you're new here, hit that thumbs up, and make sure you follow me on all my social media at CPNYSports. Not only on YouTube at CPNYSports, but also X and Instagram as well. I appreciate it. See you all for the pregame. Thank you so much. And all I can say is, Pete Alonso, we are rooting for you, and we need better. Peace.
Thank you for watching the True Mets Talk podcast. Make sure you're tapping on that notifications button and checking out all the latest content on the channel. Thank you.